Welcome to the Deep Dive. Tonight we're tackling a question that, well, it might seem surprisingly quiet, almost ordinary on the surface. What actually happened to Adolf Hitler's family after World War II?
It's a fascinating question and maybe not the one people expect.
Right. We're not chasing grand conspiracies here.
Yeah.
Not at all. Instead, we're trying to trace the small, everyday choices made by people living under an extraordinary shadow.
Choices made far away from the headlines.
Exactly. Think of it like a long corridor filled with quiet decisions, muted fears, and this really stubborn, very human need to just live a normal life.
Even when normal seems almost impossible.
Yeah. So if you're expecting huge, dramatic revelations, this probably isn't that kind of exploration. This is more about understanding the human side, the day-to-day reality of carrying an unbearable legacy.
And it's important to remember, Adolf Hitler, the man, didn't just vanish as an idea. He had relatives, a family network,
People left behind.
people left behind. And after the war, most of them, well, they retreated, stepped back from public life almost entirely. They didn't become new celebrities, certainly not new political
Or
figures.
just trying to live.
They simply tried to live. In a world where that name, Hitler, could still conjure up terror or intense curiosity, but the immediate direct pressure, it started to ease, slowly, unevenly, and probably quite painfully for many.
So our mission here for this deep dive is to understand how they navigated that.
Precisely. How did they manage in this new era? And for this first part, we'll look at two of the most, documented threads people often ask about. Paula Hitler, Adolf's sister.
His younger sister.
Yes. And William Patrick Hitler, his nephew. Their stories are quite different, but they really illustrate the broader kinds of paths taken.
It's genuinely hard to imagine the sheer weight of that name, the post-war world. It didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat, did it? It didn't treat them like some kind of living museum exhibit.
No, quite the opposite in many ways. What it offered instead was something else. Anonymity, maybe distance, and for some, a very cautious chance at just ordinary life.
Which must have felt like a strange kind of freedom, maybe.
Or perhaps a different kind of burden. But yeah, think about it. How would you build a normal life when your family name is synonymous with it?
Well, with that, it takes a certain kind of quiet strength.
Let's start with Paula then, Adolf's younger sister, born 1896. You described her path as a quiet counterpoint. What did that look like after 1945?
Well, the end of the war didn't push her onto a stage. No microphone, no public statements, really. Instead, she got something maybe rarer and in its own way, possibly more unsettling: privacy.
She just disappeared from view.
Pretty much. She spent the decades after the war deliberately avoiding any kind of spotlight. She stayed away from politics, steered clear of the sensational stories people were undoubtedly looking for. Hitler's sister, that alone was a headline.
So she actively chose obscurity. Actively chose it. Her life seems to have been quite solitary, very practical, unadorned by the kind of grand, tragic narratives you might expect.
Did she marry? Have a family that became known?
She never married in a way that created any public buzz, no. And she didn't leave behind a public legacy that could be easily mythologized or twisted, what little record there is. It just paints this picture of quiet endurance.
Just someone trying to get by.
Someone trying to live a normal, everyday life under the most extraordinary historical pressure imaginable. And her story is, I think, a really important reminder.
How so?
Well, it reminds us that when your family name carries the weight of a continent's darkest chapter, not everyone wants to turn that into some public saga. Some people just want peace. They just want to be left alone.
That makes sense. A deep desire for quiet. But that wasn't the only path, was it? Let's talk about William Patrick Hitler, the nephew, son of Adolf's half-brother Alois Jr.
Right. William Patrick, or Willie, as he was sometimes known earlier on.
His story seems to embody a different kind of tension, doesn't it? This idea of how do you distance yourself from that name, a name just soaked in terror and complicity, but still, acknowledge it exists. You can't just pretend it's not there.
Exactly. That's the tightrope he had to walk. And his strategy was quite different from Paula's retreat. It was more about conscious, deliberate reinvention.
Invention? How?
Well, the big move, first off. After the war, he relocated his family to the United States.
Okay, that's significant.
Hugely significant. Looking back, it really reads like an attempt to step out from under that enormous shadow, to start fresh, maybe, in a country that had its own complex relationship with the war and its memory.
And did he try to hide the name or change it?
Oh, definitely. He absolutely worked to distance himself from the Hitler name. I mean, you can hardly blame him, can you, given the sheer crushing weight of it.
So his focus was creating a new identity, finding a space where the name didn't define him.
Precisely. His life, from what we can piece together in those post-war years, seems meticulously ordinary. He and his family sought anonymity. They wanted safety. They wanted quiet.
Just to blend in.
To blend in, exactly. To be just another family living their lives in a country that, let's be honest, wasn't always going to greet a relative of Hitler with, well, with warmth or even simple curiosity.
Did he get involved in politics or public life at all?
No, not in any significant way. He never seemed to seek political influence. He made his living in fairly modest private sector jobs.
Yeah.
The real struggle for him, the tension, it wasn't about avoiding some grand scandal.
What was it about then?
It feels more like that quiet, constant internal pressure. How do you raise children who aren't forever defined by that name? How do you build a life, your own life, where you can just breathe without worrying about whispers or suspicion?
That sounds exhausting.
It must have been. So his actions, it seems, weren't about one single dramatic break. It was more like a series of cautious, very practical steps to normalize life after the war. And yes, that included changing surnames, trying to lower the visibility of his lineage as much as possible.
Okay, so we have Paula's quiet retreat into privacy and William Patrick's more active, deliberate reinvention in a new country. What do these two examples tell us about the broader family experience, that long corridor you mentioned earlier?
Well, they show there wasn't just one way. The end of the war didn't funnel all the relatives into the same experience, not at all. It created more of a split, the spectrum of responses.
Like what?
You had some relatives who basically vanished from public record, just disappeared. Others who definitely changed their names, like William Patrick's family. Then there were those who tried to, just quietly blend back into the social fabric wherever they were.
Without making a big fuss.
Right. And then, of course, there were some who couldn't avoid it, who faced ongoing scrutiny simply because of who they were related to.
It sounds less like a historical event and more
Yeah.
just human, messy.
It is messy. It's fundamentally human. Watching how people navigate a world that has learned to fear or at least deeply distrust the very source of their kinship. And you have to remember the context.
The post-war climate.
Exactly. The social, the cultural climate. That name carried an enormous stigma, a weight that could absolutely contaminate everything: social interactions, job prospects, even just basic personal safety.
So what kind of practical challenges did that climate create for them beyond just the awkwardness?
Oh, it went beyond awkwardness. You had potential issues with anti-extremist laws in some places, social sanctions, being ostracized by neighbors or communities, real concerns about personal safety sometimes, and just constant community scrutiny, people watching, judging.
Wow. And how did they deal with memory? You can't just switch off your family history.
No, you can't. And that brings in this idea of, let's call it in-between memory. That really difficult space where you don't just erase your past overnight, even if part of you desperately wants to, you live with it. It's present, but often unspoken.
So navigating that meant creating new rules for themselves, new boundaries.
Absolutely. New social scripts, maybe. Deciding who to tell, what to tell, how to live with the unsaid. For Hitler's relatives, achieving a normal life wasn't just something that happened. It often required this act of, well, you called it quiet defiance earlier.
Quiet defiance against the past. It really makes you think. And it leads to these questions that historians still wrestle with.
Definitely. Big question.
Like, how much distance is ever really enough when your surname is basically shorthand for a regime that caused such unimaginable horror?
That's a core one. There's no easy answer.
And how does a family member even begin to rebuild a life without being constantly forced to, publicly explain or apologize for every single family connection or choice?
Right. Where are the space for private life, for personal healing, when the public gaze is potentially always there?
These aren't crisp, satisfying questions, are they? They feel more like those soft, tired questions that linger after a catastrophe.
That's a good way to put it. And the answer is the adjustments the family members made were often quiet, understated, which in a way carried its own risk.
The risk of just fading away.
Fading away, yeah. Of becoming nothing more than a footnote in a history that always seems to want larger-than-life figures, heroes, or villains.
But you also mentioned a kind of dignity in that quietness.
I think so, yes. For those relatives who weathered that intense initial pressure, who deliberately chose anonymity, who protected their own families, there is a certain kind of historical dignity there.
Not a flashy kind of dignity.
No, not the dignity of triumph, certainly not vengeance. It's much quieter. It's the dignity of enduring a name that never, ever stops echoing, heavily, complicatedly.
It almost brings it down to the everyday, doesn't it?
It does. In the wake of unbelievable destruction, what do families do? Some lean into their own private lives with this stubborn practicality. They cook meals, they might keep diaries, they watch the weather, plan for birthdays or holidays. They try very, very hard not to become a symbol.
So, wrapping up this first part of our look at Hitler's family after the war,
Hmm.
the big takeaway seems to be that it's not one single story, not a dramatic arc.
No, it's more like a cluster, a collection of small, careful, sometimes maybe desperate choices.
We've seen different approaches. Some relatives just stepped away completely. Some guarded their privacy with almost legal or social stealth. And others just tried slowly, carefully to rejoin the world as ordinary people.
Ordinary neighbors, ordinary citizens.
And the narrative we're tracing here, it's not really about heroic survival in the face of odds or some grand moral reckoning with the past. It seems to be about something simpler, maybe more profound.
Which is
It's the plain, stubborn fact of living on, living after a name that never fully leaves the room, no matter how quietly you close the door.
Yeah. And if you think about that, maybe late at night, there might be a strange sort of, I don't know, comfort isn't quite the right word, but a realization
What kind of realization?
that even in the deepest shadow cast by one of history's absolute villains, families, they find ways, they carry on, they find quiet corners, build small routines. They hope maybe to just get through the day as themselves, not as a headline waiting to happen.
That quiet resilience.
That quiet resilience, exactly. If you listen for it, it's its own kind of history lesson. It's not the roar of battle, not the thunder of politics. It's the soft, persistent sound of ordinary life just continuing, even when the past is always there, maybe knocking politely but persistently at the door.
And that persistence, that knock at the door, raises more questions we need to explore in part 2.
Definitely. We've only scratched the surface.
We'll shift focus next time. Look at how public memory actually treated the Hitler name in different places, different countries. What kinds of rumors kept swirling around about surviving relatives? And how did that affect real people just trying to live ordinary lives?
And we'll need to unpack that tension more between memory and anonymity. That really delicate dance a family tries to perform, staying out of sight while knowing the world is still, in some ways, watching.
It's complex. The past certainly doesn't rush to simple conclusions, and neither will we. So until then,
Until next time.
may your sleep be steady as we continue to quietly explore these longer shadows of history.